Hi friends, I'm Prairie Vintage. My name's Linda, and I totally wanted to put this video together for quite some time. And what came up in the reading was heavy twin flame energy in the last sort of love reading, I guess, that I did. So I felt the suffering there, and it totally took me back. And I was just like, well, it was late, so I was just way too tired to get into anything. But I knew that there was someone listening to this reading just like going through or suffering or trying to put the pieces together. So I thought, okay, I have to totally put this video together. But I also know that some of you guys have been here for a while and have been on this journey. So some of this might be things you already know, although I was intending on putting a video of things you don't generally hear or that are kind of uncommon on the twin flame journey, because there's so much information out there. So first I want to say, your journey is your journey. So nobody, not including me, anybody can tell you what is right on the twin flame journey and who is your twin flame. That's going to be something that's part of the journey you're going to have to uncover on your own, okay? And it sucks because at a certain point you really are going back and forth. And if you're anything like me, you're always completely skeptical, so it's never going to be your twin flame. And you're like, well, how will I ever uncover this? Because I'm always going to be skeptical. You'll get there because there's things that happen that you're just like undeniably that I can't, now I'm just making lies or excuses that this person is not my twin. So we'll get into all of that, but I do want you to certainly, use your own judgment. Now, in saying that, I do a lot of readings, hundreds of readings. A lot of times there are twin flame relationships and people don't even realize that they're in it. And I could tell based on the emails, the information, the energy that I'm reading. So it's very evident to me when someone's on the journey, but there's a lot of people who either want to be on the journey or think they're on the journey, and it's not. And that's most likely the case, okay? So just kind of use that as a guideline. If it feels to you like something you've experienced in the past or close to something you've experienced in the past, like just a little bit more, probably not the twin flame journey. If this is something, and we'll get into it, that's completely made you want to just make it go away, like just make it go away because your life is completely different, then that's most likely your twin flame and you are well on your way to a spiritual awakening. Okay, so let's get into what this looks like. So first I wanted to say a lot of teachers online or information's like, okay, you can know your twin flame. Remember, there's no hard set rules, okay? And this is what I'm finding is like no one knows the answers, and as we evolve, things completely change here, okay? So scripture, old teachings refer to twin flames. So twin flames have been around since forever and ever and ever before Christ, okay? So when we read of these teachings and teachers, they're like talking about when twin flames trigger each other, they can know each other for years and then suddenly get triggered at the right time, which completely makes sense to me, and that they have to physically be present. No, energy does not know 3D, does not know boundaries, does not know anything. So big first thing that I tell a lot of people who are struggling because they come to me and they have not met their twin flame in person and they're suffering and going through this twin flame journey. So you can energetically come in contact with your twin flame via whatever means, social media, messaging, whatever the case may be, and be triggered. Also, I've read for several people now who have been triggered by a twin flame that has no idea who they even are, and they're a celebrity, okay? I know that one's a weird one. I can't even imagine, and I pass no judgment because I can't say that's not a thing, although it's happened frequently now that I can't tell you that it's not a twin flame. I can't tell them it's not a twin flame because everything they're telling me is the twin flame journey, like all of it, okay? Even though they've never talked to this person, and it's a celebrity. So can you imagine how, like, wow. So what I've uncovered is that your twin flame journey is going to be really, really specific to you, because there is a certain authentic being within you that has certain traits, pros, positive energy, and certain things that will happen in this journey that needs to highlight the dark and needs to shed away certain parts of your ego and be just enough mixture, okay, temperance, just enough mixture for you to continue down this journey without completely, like, like offing yourself, okay? There's a very fine line between insanity and offing yourself and the suffering that you go through on this journey. So some people tell me that their twins are, in 3D, or 3D, sorry, in third party relationships, and they're like players or whores or whatever you want to call it. And I couldn't imagine having it, like me at the stage where I was at. I wouldn't even entertain go anywhere near anything like this with a 10-foot pole, but I was very, very much like polar extreme, like very, very polar extreme, like, yeah, that wouldn't even be something in my realm. So in the middle ground here, my twin flame struggles with addictions and struggles with his own personal battles, which I won't uncover too much about this, but what we'll get into is the different sort of stories that can happen. So if you are one that is coming in contact with a twin flame that is a celebrity, chances are there's something within you stronger than I can deal with that allows you to go through this journey to navigate through what it's like with a celebrity. I know some people who completely have a twin flame catalyst triggering with someone who is like a hardcore drug addict. That's very difficult, but that is made for that person's journey, and them dealing with and how to navigate that would be their story. And I couldn't imagine like having to deal with something that heavy. So I am very blessed because my twin flame isn't a hardcore drug addict. He's, he has his addictions for sure, but I think it's more of the way he is that is the challenge, and the way I am, that's the challenge. But we've been in contact off and on, but throughout the whole journey, consistently, like we're always in contact, okay? And when we go into contact, it's because I get triggered and I pull away. So I'll get into my sort of story near the end for those of you guys who aren't too interested in what that is, but I'll refer to it throughout this thing. So you don't have to meet. Energetic triggering catalyst thing is a thing, and it can happen at any point, okay? So my experience though is it generally I would imagine happen early on, although it makes sense to me if you're not ready, then you could certainly be in contact with that person for a while and it not trigger, although that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me, but that's my 3D human self, but none of this makes sense. So with, again, back to my story, I got triggered, although I didn't know necessarily, because it wasn't like a bright light went off and angels were like singing and trumpets blowing and I was like, aha, like I just knew. But I'm also intuitive and energetically, like when I meet people, I'll know there's like a connection, or like that I'll know them for a while. And so with him, it was like I knew I would know him and that I knew him. And I just like automatically from near the beginning would like go and astral project and like see where he was at. It was just the weirdest thing. And I was like, why all of a sudden am I doing this? Like in my sleep, I could astral project and I'd wake up and I'd know I wasn't having a normal dream, in the past, but it was out of my control. It never happened when I wanted. I wasn't exploring it. It started at a very young age, and it was like maybe on a handful of times it happened. But this was like instantly, well, after meeting him, it was like, oh, I kind of saw where you were. Like, that's a little bit like, that was weird, right? And I'm telling him this because at that point, I was somebody very transparent, okay? I was somebody who was just very open, and there was nothing for me to, to try to manipulate, I guess, especially when talking to him. I was just like kind of being myself. So that's a big one, okay? The energy thing. You can certainly be triggered. Now, how do you know, for sure that you're triggered? Well, the big sign is for the divine feminine, energy only, we're only talking energy, she gets spiraled into a spiritual awakening, dark night of the soul, ego death, ego degradation, whatever you want to call it, but it is the darkest place. And so everything in her life gets turned upside down, okay? Like everything. So it might take a while for her to come to terms with this and to do and deal with things that she's being forced to look at. But she may leave her marriage, quit her job, um, sell her home, whatever. Like all these things are happening simultaneously. Okay, all these things happened to me when I met my twin flame. Like my life was completely upside down. And so I would pride myself on having structure and order. Again, like I said, the triggering was the way of being. And so my whole way of being was being me. I mean, we're all ourselves, right? So you could say, well, I'm me. But the me was such a shell of a person, because who I was all of the things that were in my life and the people and the structure I had built. So it was, I am my job. Okay. Career was like top for me because I could focus on it. My business. So I gave a lot of energy and time. And if you see some of my past videos, is because of how I was brought up and having to really just work hard to be a doer and to make something of myself, and not even prove to other people that I have this capacity or capability or talent. It was more me having to attain a level of security for myself, and to, it wasn't really prove it, because I always felt like this is a new epiphany for me. I always felt I could. Okay. I always felt I could. Like I never really thought that I would be limited or had limitations, although I was always told, you know, by my upbringing that we were brought up limited, and that, you know, rich people or people who had the ability to do things would amount to things, and we'd have to grind and do all that. So the grinding definitely was conditioning, but I never thought that I had less than. But what I needed to prove to myself was the security and build that world, because when I grew up, there was a little bit of security. Like I didn't know, you know, whether the next day, like my parents would be jobless or have a job, or people were like breaking in. And there was so much like angst, like bricks flying through the window, like just childhood stories I could go on about when I look back on it. Like I could have been kidnapped. My sister was, like things that I tell people, and they're like, Linda, that's not normal. And I think, well, it made me who I am. And I'm this loving person, you know, with all these siblings and all these stories. But I mean, we were poor and we were trying to like make it through. And for me, it became my culture and who I was. But I was always in a high state of anxiety, like always, and anxious. So it was like everything I had to do was like organized and structurally. It's like, hey, I have to have a job, I have to get married, I have to kids, not have to, but it was like that was my goal for myself. Like I really wanted these things in order to, you know, get tickety boo on my things to do. So I got married at 18. I had 2 kids, bought the house, grind. And I mean, there was no like traveling, there was no real major life experiences. I mean, obviously at that point, I was so done with life experience, I felt, because in my teenage years and just growing up, it was like so much stuff that's already happened. It's like, that was the last thing I wanted to do, is bars and parties and all that. Although for, you know, growing up, there was a bit of that going on with my friends, and I just outgrew all of that stuff. So that was my life. And so when my twin flame comes in, there is this me not wanting to like recognize that for my marriage at that point in time was definitely not good, and it hadn't been good for quite some time. Okay. And I was already aware of it. I was out of denial, although I was still in my marriage, because for me, it was more important to do those other things and to keep security. And obviously with children, and my children were already older at that time. So it wasn't like I had like little kids. I mean, they're always little and they're always your babies, but it wasn't like they were young. Like I think my son was 18 already and my daughter was 16, in and around there. Okay. So, I mean, still children for sure. But for me, it was, I don't really care that I'm not happy in my marriage and emotionally I'm not fulfilled and that none of that stuff. Although my husband is very, very, very much my cheerleader, very much my soulmate. I mean, I'm 44, I've been married since 18. He's like a blessing in my life and wouldn't trade it for the world, and have the greatest friendship with him. Okay, so there's that. But all the other stuff that just didn't work anymore in the relationship was so prevalent and apparent to me when I met my twin flame. It was like hitting me like a ton of bricks, and I couldn't breathe. That I was like, I don't think I've ever understood what it would be like to be in love or feel these feelings. Okay, so I always felt that my heart was open because I've always been a very loving, giving person. I've always felt gratitude for the things I have, and I think this is why I've been very successful, you know, being very grateful and loving and open and caring. So I always felt my heart was open. So we don't know that our heart is not open until we meet our twin flame. Okay, this is something that many people don't realize. And this heart opening isn't like in the movies where you say, oh, I've never loved anyone like this, because of course I loved my husband, like I did, and I could still say I loved him. But I'm talking unconditional heart chakra opening, where it's like once you meet your twin flame, that love, it starts very painful, because heart chakra opening is very painful. It opens up so wide that you start to feel love for everything the same way you do your twin flame. That takes a while, but you start to love everything and everyone, and you just, all you see is unconditional love, oneness, and you can't separate yourself from all these things. Okay, so that's how you know you're well already on your way to the journey through this, because it becomes, how can you love the world better and the people better? So the heart opening, as it happens, it is quite the process, and you're not quite sure what's happening. So you're shedding egos, okay, many egos. And this is the part of the dark night of the soul and the painful part that happens while you're going through this journey, because it is, for me anyway, and like I said, every journey is completely different, but for me, there were intense points in time where I literally thought, like, mentally my head was just in some really stuck loop, and I was going to like go insane. And it wasn't that I was I was really fixated on like my twin, because I couldn't, no matter what I tried, like get my attention away, you know. And it wasn't like I was trying to obsessively like chase him. I felt I was obsessively trying to forget and obsessively trying to change what that was. So I was resisting and resisting. I was like, but see, this is why I don't know if I was runner or chaser. Most likely I was chaser, because I was the one initiating with him. We'll get into all that. So I gotta get on with my story. So here I am, like trying to like just, I have to forget and not even be in this, because for me it was so easy and simple to keep things simple. Like that was what I wanted to do. I want to keep my structure, I want to keep things simple. I don't want to feel anything here, you know. But I couldn't lie either. I was like, okay, so I'm going to be honest. So I would say to him, you know, okay, here's how I'm feeling. Like, how are you feeling? Like, do we try this? Like, you know, are you open to a relationship? And he'd be like, I'm not looking for a serious relationship. So I was like, okay, triggered, because I'm like, well, then I'm feeling this way and he's not. And of course, for me, like, I mean, remember, I haven't had many relationships. So I'm like, okay, I'm not even sure, one, how this is even supposed to work, but two, like, why are you constantly then in my, like, communicating with me? That just seemed weird. So I was like, okay, he doesn't want this. So I had to accept it. So at first, when he first told me, it was hurtful, but I think it was like the next day, I was like, okay, this is okay. You know, he doesn't want a relationship. That makes sense to me. And I think I ended up messaging him or whatever it was. And I just felt this like heaviness. Like I felt like he was heavy, and I felt like he was sad in some way. And then I felt like I was like heavy and sad, and I was like, okay, this is weird. Like you said you don't want anything, and I thought this would be okay, but something doesn't feel right. So we'd stay in contact, you know, and again, I would try, and I'm like here, like, I'm feeling even more for you. Like, do you want to, you know, get with me? Like, what's going on? He's like, no, I don't want a serious relationship. And so I'm like, ugh, like I'm bringing this pain upon me, and he doesn't want anything to do with me in that regard. And so I'm like, well, why the fuck are you messaging me? You know, I'm just like, I don't understand this. So of course, you know, at first is like, I'm trying to see like maybe we can establish something, and maybe it's still early and maybe he needs to know me. But I felt like anytime I pushed towards him, he didn't want anything to do with that. Okay, so that's, I guess, sign number whatever, you can count the signs. But someone is definitely not open to exploring. Okay, and although I was very structured in my way and I'd rather it not happen, I came to the point where I was open to exploring, and he was not even anywhere near that. Okay, and I think I got like close to wanting to explore it like very early. So I quit my job maybe a year after knowing my twin flame, and only because I had to. Like, I could not think straight. So you get exhausted, and I'm talking about so fucking exhausted because your kundalini, your energy is flowing, okay, and your internal body is making way physically for your energy and all of this new information that you're going to be channeling, and energy that you're going to be flowing through your kundalini. So physically your body and your mind is exhausted. Okay, so here I'm exhausted. I can't put a thought together at all. So there's no way that I could work. I mean, for, you know, a long time, I was like just trying to make it by, but it was just like, this isn't even my style. Like I pride myself on being present in my work and, you know, doing what I need to do here. And it was just, I couldn't do it. I could not do it, could not. And that again was my journey challenge, was because for me, that was top of my list, was like priding myself on doing and that work thing. And so it was like such a big like blow to me to be like, I can't even organize papers. Like I'd make fun of people who couldn't organize papers, like, or multitask, right? And there's no way multitask. Like I couldn't even one task. It was so fucking bizarre. Okay, so here I'm like, oh my god, like I can't think, you know. And this is when we were in our very first separation, which he kind of initiated, but it was because I got triggered and he just ran. I got triggered, he ran. And so it was like 4 months where we, or about 3.5, where he just didn't reply back to me and I didn't chase. Okay, and I even said to him, I ain't chasing early on. And I've tried not to chase, although energetically I always would put out there like, hey, do you want to try this when we're together, right? But when we're separate, it was like, I'm not chasing this guy. So here we are apart, you know, and I'm seeing these numbers, okay? So synchronicities, these numbers, and I have a video on this. I'm not talking about, oh, 1111, like I catch that every day, you know, or 1111 and then 111, I'm catching that every day. I am talking about, you're seeing this like 8, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 times a day, where you're seeing repeat numbers. And these numbers change as you go through the journey. Again, your journey, so it could be the same numbers, and your thing could be names. Okay, I didn't see names. I mean, I saw his name here and there, but this is kind of common name. And you know, I never really put too much into it. So like, yeah, at work there was a guy who had his name, but I mean, what am I gonna say? So every time I'd hear it, it's like, okay, but I wasn't saying, ooh, his name's being called out. So therefore, like, I didn't even know what twin flames were at this point, okay, until I finally looked up what the frick was going on. And that's the whole other thing, is you most likely, if you're on the twin flame journey, you did not know anything about what a twin flame is, twin flame journey, twin flame relationship. You weren't searching for it, you weren't seeking it, and now you find yourself in it. That's the most common way you know you're on the journey, is that you weren't trying to manifest some sort of twin flame, because then of course your ego is going to attribute whatever sort of you want this person to be in your life, right? So I did not know what it was. I did not know even synchronicities. Like, yes, I was always kind of spiritual with my crystals and but it was more like new age spirituality, like, you know, crystals and teas and incense and peace and love, you know, because I felt a lot of love, and it was enough, but it was really coming from like the solar plexus energy, which, I mean, I'm not going to get into all of that, but solar plexus energy, you know, law of attraction, we are what we put out there, and having the confidence to make things happen in my life, and to really believe in the power of positivity and that sort of thing. But that's not quite getting up to the upper chakras, which is heart chakra base, which is like, you know, that being positive is one thing, but that has absolutely nothing to do with shedding of the ego and learning forgiveness and unconditional love. Okay, so this is the journey I'm at, going from my solar plexus general SQ, if you will, okay, my spiritual IQ, or I guess SQ, to my heart-based consciousness, which was opening up to something different that I've never been, and shedding all the things that I thought I was. So I'm seeing numbers predominantly. I mean, 1111 I saw before my twin. Okay, I would see 1111 often and didn't make anything of it. I just thought it was cool, and it didn't ramp up more as I kind of got close to him, or close to meeting him. But after I met him, it was really like I would see 1111, 111 all the time, and ones, but it changed very quickly to twos, and I was seeing twos galore, and mostly it was always 5 2s. Okay, and so when you think about it, like you could see 222 on the clock, I was seeing that at the same time, but I was seeing like 5 2s on like the calendar, and this was back in 2022 as well. So I mean, I'd see those twos there too, but it was like on my computer, on the paperwork, on the receipts, on the license plates, on the billboard, on the number, on the park bench, on the, and all I kept seeing were these fucking numbers. Okay, and it was like a movie because the numbers were fucking really scary. So I'm swearing a lot because that was a really intense point in time. And so then I was seeing a lot of that for a very long time. And then I have a video all about that, because even seeing numbers in success, like in succession, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10, you know, and then seeing the mirrored numbers, 10 10, 12 12, 10 01, like those types of mirrored numbers. But it was always so consistent that it was like, of course you're gonna catch it eventually. And I wasn't even searching. I was like trying not to see after a while. So I prayed to God, like, why am I seeing this? I have no idea what this means. Because at that point, like I said, I wasn't into all of that stuff. And I just knew like something bizarre is happening here, because I had to like pull over my car, and I was like crying. I was like crying and crying. Like, what do you want from me? Like, what do you want? Like, okay, I see numbers. Like, what? He doesn't want to a serious relationship. I'm okay with this, although I feel like I want to be with him. I feel connected to him, you know, and I don't know what you want. Stop with the numbers, you know, and I was still seeing them and seeing them. And then they kind of ramped off a little, but my twin and I were back together, you know, in contact, although still haven't met face to face. And so the numbers did stop, but they started again. You know, they would be off and on, and I feel very comforted by the numbers now, and they are reassuring, but you'll see that. And so the dreams, okay, now I am talking about dreams unlike any dreams you've ever had. And I think this is very common. Now, this doesn't mean if you're not dreaming, it's not your twin, because like I said, it's your journey. Okay, and I've always had dreams, and some very profound dreams, before I met my twin. So this to me at first was normal, but after a while it was like, this is not normal, because I met him in my dream, like right maybe the first week I had made contact with him initially. And I was so excited about telling him about this dream, you know, because it didn't feel like a dream at all. And I had seen him. And as I'm calling him to explain to him this, he is listening to me. And now that I think about it, I think like, how crazy was I? You know, I barely knew him. And I'm like spilling my guts about this dream and how he's sitting and what he looks like. And he disconfirms some of what I'm saying. He's like, yeah, that's totally how I wear my hat. And that's totally my favorite number. And that's totally this. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I was seeing all these things, and it, you know, it was validating that he's saying, yes, like that sounds like exactly how I look. And I haven't met him. I didn't even know what he looked like. Okay. So I didn't even know what my twin flame looked like. I'm just talking energy. So of course I'm talking to him about this dream and blah, blah, blah. And my twin and I, we don't talk over the phone. Okay. Like rarely ever. I think maybe most we've ever talked maybe 5 times ever over the phone in the last like 3 years. So this was a very rare occurrence, although I didn't know it at the time because this is early on, and I'm sharing all this stuff with him, which was also a very rare occurrence because I don't normally talk to people about that sort of thing. Okay, although like I said, I was open, transparent with people. For me, it was always about asking them, and this might have to do with like my career because I was in sales, like asking them about what's going on in their world. And it was almost like a deflective thing of having people to talk, like open up to me and to talk to me about what's going on and to like be honest and share like my feelings about what I think and this and that. But rarely would people ever really inquire about, my dreams and my vision. And it didn't bug me. I think it was my way of protecting myself in some way, right? So I found that weird, that I'm like, why am I telling this guy about this stuff? Like, it just was so weird, but I felt like I could tell him anything, and he just understood me right from the get-go. So that's another thing. Your twin is just going to understand everything about you. Of course, the triggers are going to like trigger each other, so there's that. But for the most part, you feel very comfortable telling your twin like the weirdest, randomest things. That's like, I wouldn't have ever told anybody this or felt comfortable sharing this piece of information. So I do tell him things that's like I don't really tell people because and you don't feel like it's like a desperate bond attempt. It's almost like it just comes out. It's like you just find yourself telling them, things. And I don't know, he doesn't really tell much to me. So it's kind of, again, catered to me because it's like most people I've been with, it's like they're pouring themselves out to me. And that's what I'm used to, right? So here he is, very removed, not giving anything energetically back to me, listening to me. And I mean, I'm feeling comfortable sharing all of this until then I get triggered saying, well, why are you so not telling me? Like, and then I'm thinking he's closed or he's not sharing because he doesn't want me a part of his life, or, and all these ego things that I start to tell myself. And so it'd be often on triggers because I'd always feel as though I'm energetically trying to connect and bond and share, and he's receptive, but not engaging back with me. So that was a big trigger I had to work through, and still, I'm trying to work through, because it's like when you think logically, you're like, what sort of relationship could you have with anybody where they're closed and removed? Like, that's very difficult. But then I go back to, that's how I was, I was, and it's not closed and removed so much as very guarded in a way, like I'm sure if somebody had asked me, maybe it would put me off in some way, like, oh, okay, like that's weird, no one's asked me. And so it'd be a weird thing for me to have to overcome this. But I feel like I'm witnessing me in some way at an extreme way, because he's really like, he won't share with me emotions or communicate with me like how he's feeling, just out of his own sort of need to do so. I have to ask and and tell him. And even then he gives me very minimal about himself, but I feel like I can tell him all these things about me. So there's that whole catering thing. But another thing that happens that's very rare, or I guess, I don't know, I don't see a whole lot of this, is my eyes changed color. Okay. That part he didn't believe me, or at least he was kind of skeptical, because I told him early on when my Kundalini was activated, my eyes are really dark, like almost black dark, like they're brown, obviously not black, but they're really dark brown. They almost look black in some points. And they went like really light brown hazel, okay, where I could really see my pupils. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this is weird. And of course he has blue eyes. I have brown eyes, which is very common with twin flames to have opposite colored eyes. So I didn't know this at the point, like that, twins are obviously sharing energetically, and they have very similar physical traits as well. Okay, I did not know this, but with the eye color, I was like, why are my eyes looking like this? Like it kind of tripped me out. And so he's sending me, as I'm telling him, he's sending me like links online about, as you age, your eyes change color, which is true. But it was like he was trying to like reassure me in some way, and like calling me old at the same time. And so we joked about it, and I'm like, okay. And I was just like, maybe, maybe I'm just like overly seeing this thing as something. And I kind of chopped it up, because it only lasted like, I don't know, for a few months, where my eyes were really light color. And then they went back to my dark eyes. So that was really weird, but they definitely went lighter. And I didn't see my twin, like see what he looked like for at least, I think it was 6 months, if not maybe 8 months, where I didn't see him. We met online, and I did not know what he looked like. I talked to him about the dream and called him, and I thought things flowed okay, although it was flowing was me talking. And when I saw his picture, I felt connected to him, although it wasn't, again, like trumpets blowing and like angels falling from heaven. It was just like, oh, okay, like now I can put, like my sort of understanding of energy of who you are. And then he sent me a video of him, like the backside of him at a concert that was online, which can't really tell, you see him so much, but I could feel his energy. And after I saw movement, okay, when I saw movement, because it wasn't a picture, I was like, I could feel energetically a connection to him, and I could almost feel like my own movement. It's really hard to explain, okay? Like his movement felt like my movement. So energetically, when you see your twin, it's like you could see yourself in many different ways, okay? And sometimes even physically, like twins sometimes have like the same shaped face or the same shaped eyes and this sort of thing. And I don't know necessarily that him and I do. I think he has an intense stare, and I think I have an intense stare, and I could see similarities in that. And I think we're also very like quick movers. I'm pretty sure he likes to move quickly, unless we're in our sloth stage. But that is all reflected, okay? So the mirroring definitely in physical sort of attributes is a thing that happens, okay? So now I felt comfortable in talking to him about my kundalini, but it was kind of just as passing, me saying, hey, with my kundalini, like I didn't say he triggered any of my kundalini or any of that. It's just telling him I had those dreams, and I started having more dreams with him. And sometimes I tell him about the dream, and oftentimes I don't. And it's because he doesn't say anything except, oh, like there was never any sort of feedback back to my dream, and so I don't know that I was expecting him to have an answer to this, or at least to just be as into it as I was, and he wasn't, or at least he didn't show this. So for me, it was like, well, my nature again, it's like I'm not gonna be pouring myself out to all this. So I found his nature to really sort of trigger me in a way that has to deal with how I am, because I am not the type of person ever that would, I don't know, like outwardly go and seek out validation or confirmation or acceptance from other people, okay? And so this is what my journey, again, might be different with you, but if you can relate with this type of energy that I am with, which I'm sure some of you guys can, it's weird because with him, it was like, why do I want him to like do something here, like, validate me or acknowledge what's going on with me and with him? And that was so strong, and I've never experienced this ever. Like, so when I read about twin flames, and you have to find your self-worth, and you have to understand that, other people, what they perceive of you doesn't state your value. Like, it doesn't make who you are, and you have to learn that your boundaries and learn your self-worth if your twin flame is not recognizing you, and appreciate yourself and turn your energy inwards. And so I sat with that. I was like, yes, this makes complete sense. But previous to my twin flame, that's where my energy was going, was myself. Like, I honestly never needed any approval of anything other than just creating like I said, my foundation of safety and structure. So honestly, I know this sounds really bad, but I wouldn't really care so much about other people. And, again, I had a loving heart, like I said, and I loved and had gratitude, but I really didn't care. Like, I really didn't care to have what people would think, what they thought of me, all of that stuff. Like, it was so not even in my radar. Like, I knew I was having the things I needed. I knew I ticked my own boxes. And for me, I was like confident, I was secure, I was all of these things. And I wouldn't say it was cocky or whatever. It was just all these things I built for myself because I needed those things. Yeah, I needed to tell myself, hey, I'm beautiful, I'm confident, I'm attractive, I'm I'm successful, I'm intelligent, I'm all these things. I believe those things, okay? I never was, oh, what was me? I'm not good enough, or I need love, or I need all these things. No. So, and I think this had to do with because I had my husband and he was very supportive of me and made me feel beautiful, like, inside myself. I felt beautiful. So I was like, what's this lesson? Like, what is this lesson here that I'm with someone now and I'm needing his approval in some way? Like, not that I needed him to approve, but just validate me or like love me and like make me like reciprocate something here. And he still doesn't. Well, I say still doesn't. That's very mean. He tells me he loves me and I know he loves me and he's very caring and he messages me all the time. And so there's that. But what I feel is he still doesn't, if I say, like I cut my hand off, he won't be like, oh, like, are you okay? Let me take care of you. Like, it's just not his nature at all. I'll just be like, that sucks. Like, it's so very much chill, maybe not to that extreme. If I cut my hand off, I sure hope he's not just like blasé about it, but he is very blasé about anything. Like, I could tell him anything, and at that time that was a trigger because I'm like, I'm telling you and I'm pouring out my soul. I was telling him how I felt about him, that I felt all these things, and he'd just send me like a heart, and I'm like, what? I just like sent you all of this like soulful information and how I'm feeling and talking about all these pain things, and he just couldn't reflect back to me. Okay, so that was really triggering at first, and then now it's like I just know that that's how he is, and if he sends me a heart, like I just accept the heart as him showing his love and his gratitude, although I'm still sorting through, like, when I think, I don't talk to him on the phone. Why not? Like, why can we not communicate like normal people? Why do we just keep this on text? Like, why is he still keeping me at this like sort of this bubble stage, or bubble stage, I guess, whatever, keeping a bubble around him and I for protection or for whatever reason? And so that still remains. But when I push towards inquiring about anything about progression, that's when things get triggered. But if I'm just like there accepting his good morning and his whatever and not pulling myself energetically, we just seem to evolve. We just seem to evolve. And now it's like I'll hear from him in the morning, I'll hear from him at night, and he'll like things he would never do in the past, where he would go MIA for like a week, or 4 days or whatever. Never really longer than 4 days. But in the beginning, it was really triggering because it's like, well, why are we bonding and connecting, and then you disappear for, however many days? Like, I was really triggered and offended. And that would be nothing that I would ever deal with in my regular life, right? Like, if someone doesn't have time for me, then I just close that chapter and move on. Like, wouldn't even consider. And so with him, it was like triggering. Like, what do you mean? Like, why all of a sudden are you like running away? Or like, when I know how he feels, because I could feel it, but yet in the 3D, his actions were the opposite of what was going on energetically. And I think that really triggered me. So that's another thing, is like, if you're intuitive, and maybe even if you're not with this twin flame thing, I mean, everyone's intuitive, but maybe at first you're developing an intuition. But I was always like highly intuitive and could read energy. So here I am feeling the same energy from him. And then all of a sudden on the outside, it's like, I don't want a serious relationship. I won't text you for, 3 days or 2 days, or we can bond one night, and then I don't hear from him, and I'm thinking, this doesn't match his energy. Like, I don't understand this. And so I was really perplexed, and for the longest time trying to figure it out, and then just become exhausted and doing circles. And the more you try to figure it out and push, like I said, the more they run away and put up the bubble. So another thing that came up when I said bubble was, him and I never really had a bubble phase. And I know when you read online, it's like, if you don't have a bubble phase and it's not your twin flame, it's constantly a bubble phase when I'm with my twin flame. Although it wasn't like we had passionate sex and then all of a sudden we broke up and was like, oh my God, I'm like addicted to this person, or like a week like in Hawaii, and then like all these stories I read. There was no bubble phase. All it was me meeting somebody online who I connected with, like instantaneously felt connected to, and instantly felt like I owed him something. That was something else. I told him, I feel I owe you something. Like, this is weird. Like, it was a feeling that I had to give or had to produce something. And he would just tell me, just like, be yourself. Like, you don't owe me anything. And I'm like, of course, like, I just met you. I know this, but why do I feel this way? Like, so it went from that and just like talking every day, like every morning he'd be like good morning, like from day one, and we fell in love like instantly. I mean, I think we were already in love before we even met, now that him and I talk about it. But it's like early on, it was like I told him like, here's how I'm feeling, like I love you. And thinking, okay, this guy is totally just gonna think I'm crazy. And especially the way he was, right, very kind of standoffish. And he told me he loved me as well. And I was like, kind of really surprised that he would even communicate this coming from someone who didn't. So I could feel it and I already knew it, although I didn't think he would necessarily communicate this. So there was that. Okay. But the bubble phase, like I said, it is just when you're good and understanding the energy. And it was like we could be like one, like completely energetically one for like a whole day, and then he'll pull away. And that is where the separation sort of anxiety kicks in. And I guess the very first separation triggers that dark night of the soul. It's really the separation phase that triggers the growth. And so for the 4 months, like I said, when we had the furthest we've ever been, or the longest I should say we've ever been apart, like that did trigger some stuff within me. But I wasn't going to reach out to him. Like I was set. I was like, that's it. Like I know he's coming back. Like I just knew he was coming back, and I was like just trying to do my own thing, and I couldn't focus on work. So I was really focused on myself, although he was an obsessive thought. Okay. So how it's your twin flame? It's so obsessive. It's so obsessive. Like I don't care like whether you're just like leaning into it or if you're pulling away from it. Either which way, it's going to be obsessive. Okay. And I was the type that was trying to pull away from it, and then I'm like, okay, fine. Like I'll lean into it and try to get lean into this energy and try to figure it out so I could just move on. Like, just leave me alone. That was my energy, because I was like, I need to get back to my success. I need to get back to this Linda that I was. And so here I am, like, what the fuck's twin flame? Like, and why the hell, like, what's, this avoidant attachment, and what is, this empath narcissist relationship about, and what's all this, like, twin flame stuff? And so I obviously went down the rabbit hole of trying to see all these things. And and every story that I was reading was like, oh my God, like it's so similar to like the energy of what I felt. It flipped my world completely upside down. And I was constantly in a thought of him. Like it was like a buzzing of a fridge, a consistent thought in my mind. Didn't matter what I was doing, he was on my mind, and it wasn't like, it was just there. Like there wasn't a plan so much as, but it was like a repeating thing. And so I felt my brain neurons, like I was telling my sister, I felt my brain neurons like recalibrating. And so got freaked out. I'm like, my brain must be really damaged, because I was telling her like how many months, almost like over a year, I was constantly in this like obsessive sort of state, and it is so tiring and exhausting that I felt my brain neurons rewiring into this thing. And yeah, I would say about just over a year after knowing him is when I quit my job, because I couldn't, and it was exhausting. And then it became in my mind so much that it eventually just snapped. And when I say snapped, it was like I had to release myself from suffering and go from understanding that the mind is a story. The mind is whatever programming, conditioning, indoctrination, beliefs, and whatever it is that illusions you tell yourself, but it's all made up, because your experiences are creating these thoughts, okay? But the experience is something's happened in the past and is not who you are. So I had to really like lean into meditation. For me, that helped. And again, you guys can find what helps for you, but meditation, I was clearing my chakras. And the meditation that really connected to me was when I removed myself from my mind to connect to my heart. And it started slowly, but I started to find peace, a break from the chatter from my mind. I was like, oh my God, like I felt like saved by God. I felt saved by God, because I was like, I don't have to suffer in my mind. I don't have to have obsessive thoughts. Like I don't, and I didn't want that. Like it's the last thing I wanted. And especially if he's like not even thinking of me in my mind, I'm thinking he's not thinking of me. He doesn't want anything with me. Why am I in these thoughts? Like someone who I met for all of a ham sandwich. Like time to go on, and that's the other part of the twin flame thing, is someone that you probably would have never even been triggered like this, like ever. So you don't understand it. It makes no fucking logic at all. So back to, me kind of trying to tap to my heart space, it was like I kept forcing myself to go to the heart and drop mind. And that is hard, but that's part of the spiritual journey. Okay. And that was the beginning of the real spiritual awakening, for the last 2 years, where it was like, it wasn't really about him so much as, I still obviously would be involved with him and get triggered with him and do the dance with him and want him in my life. And then I'm not sure if I do. And then I tell him, just leave me alone. And then he's like, I miss him, and then he misses me, and then we're back on. And so the whole twin flame thing still happens, but it's not as bad now with the triggering. He's still in my life, but I feel really blessed to have him, and I feel he's evolved a lot. But I feel like I find peace now. Like I'm sometimes in a state of meditation when I'm just being myself now. Like I don't even need to meditate all the time to find that state. I can find it within me when I need to, not always, but most of the time now. And that is solace, or I could say, okay, I got to find a disconnect from my mind and know when I'm in mind. So the journey asks you to really push yourself spiritually. And a big part is shedding the ego. Okay. And I'm not saying the ego is, again, like people get all angry when I do readings. I tell them, that they're an ego, and they say, how am I an ego? I've been giving, I've been wanting him to get better, I've been all of these things. And the more they push into that, the more ego I see. It's like all those things are coming from ego. Yes, they are. Because when we look at the intention behind that, we're wanting a something. And the ego wants something. The heart doesn't want anything except for outputting love. Okay. So if I'm giving love, I'm not going to say, I'm giving. Why aren't I receiving? Well, okay. Well, that's ego. Okay. If you want to give love, you give love. Okay. And it's difficult to get to that point because you got to be honest with yourself. It hurts. It hurts like a bitch when love's unreciprocated. It really, really, really hurts. But it hurts so bad because this is the pain that I went through in the journey was I felt unloved by him in a way. I felt the love energetically, but physically, I had to overcome that. He wasn't present. He couldn't be present. He wasn't present. And at first I was like, he's making an active choice not to be present. And he could have been. However, the journey required him to not be present. But energetically, I'd lean into that. And I felt there was a desire, and he was already present. So it was so like these two things that I had to reconcile, And so as I slowly started to heal, it's like I could feel him around me energetically, but it turned from him around me to it being me and me being him, and it being really comfortable in energy, and then it turning into God. Like it literally, like I'd sit there and I feel like, thank you, God. Like I feel God around me. Like God is here, God is present, God is love, and I'm like feeling this peacefulness. And I thought, wow, like this is really, really like Satori, peace, and finding this place of just tranquility. So it was more within my world. And lately it's been extending to everywhere now, where I see things and people, and I could just feel this love radiating, and I could see my twin flame love within me, within the things I'm looking at, and feel that kind of vibration already coming out of me. And so I get the oneness, and I get how it's pushing me outside of just feeling this feeling for my twin flame and this Hollywood love, if you will, to this spiritual love for humanity, and this desire to just make things okay by giving and not having any expectation or intention that it's to attain something. It starts off that way. You want to attain answers, and some of you guys might want to attain your twin flame, and that's fine. Like yes, for sure, that was like on my list. Like I wanted to be with him. It was so hurtful, but already off the hop, it was like after I tried a couple of times, like I think my ego was so already a little bit like, I wouldn't say it was so egoic. My ego was really rooted in other parts of me, where it wasn't like, what people think of me, like I said, the confidence and those types of things that I see people working through ego or having to prove themselves. Like I'd rarely ever really get into arguments with people. I'd just be like, okay, like, like I'd see it as that's their projection. Like I was already kind of in that world. So for me, the ego, which I had and I still have, that I'm working through, is parts of me thinking I'm this experience and I'm this person and I have to do these things and I have to check off these boxes and I had to make judgments about people and myself. And as I learned, like, all of that is just stories. Like, I don't know anything. Like, all I know is my experience in my mind. And that's nothing. That's an illusion. That's a filter of experience that I've had that doesn't replace the love and the consciousness behind that was there before my experience. That oneness, that love, that consciousness, it is there untainted and pure. And so all of my ego, all of my indoctrination, all of my conditioning, all of my stories to self, all of my doubts, lack, fear, anxiety, stress, worry, and desire to have an external thing, all of that ego, okay? And I realized that it's all ego. So every time a thought would come in, I'd say, is this making me feel good? Or is this triggering a response within me to make me feel bad or lack? And so with him, it's like I felt like I lacked him by my side. I felt like I needed him more in my life. I felt like all these things. And I was like, well, I'm not going to lie and be like, I don't need it. But then I was looking at it and I'm like, why do I feel I need it? And the more I was like, okay, so now I'm asking these questions. I could see it. Allow myself to feel it still don't resist it. But it's like, the more I felt like the blanket of him and God and oneness is like, I don't need him so physically here. I could go for a walk and hold his hand and feel it, and I could talk to him. And that's another thing of the twin flame, talking. Okay, I talked to him. It started right near the beginning, and I even told him this, and he said he knew this. I don't know how he knew. Sometimes he just says he knows, and I know he knows. I would just pull him around, hold his hand and walk around with him. Like, in my mind, I'm like, okay, I'm holding his hand. Like, I just feel I'm holding his hand, or I feel like he's coming with me, like I always felt like that from the beginning. But it was a little bit, it never really felt fully silly because it's happening within me and people don't know. But sometimes I'd be like, hey, this is silly because he's not here. But I'd be like, okay, but I feel him, So now I'm at the point, like, hardcore, like, I'm talking to him, and he's here beside me. I'm like, is that funny? And we talk about him, which is funny because I know it's his higher self. And so the last time we went in no contact, he came to me like instantly. He doesn't know this because I did not tell him. And he was saying, oh man, like, I'm so sorry that he's like this, and we're sitting there. I'm like, I know. Like, and then I was like, wait a minute. I'm like, no, we're passing judgment. I'm like, he's hurt. And I'm like, I'm hurt. And I'm the one who, and he's like, no, I'm here for you. And he was saying all the things that it was like that I needed him back then to say, like, he's like, no, like, you deserve happiness and I'm here for you. And if he doesn't shape up, like, don't feel you have to continuously. I'm like, no, I don't feel I have to do anything, and he was just so supportive. He's like, I'm going to stay with you. And I'm like, okay. And so for 2 days in no contact, I'm sitting with his higher self and we're just like totally like happy, and I could feel him. And, although the real 3D him's triggered, and I went no contact with him because I was upset again that he didn't make an effort to talk to me, right? So anyway, and then I got to the point where I was like, I can't be with him 3D like this, like, constantly. And I think some people did choose that. I was like, I need to send you back to him, to make sure he's okay, because I felt he wasn't okay. And so I said, go. And it's so funny because his high self, like, just instantly just like understands me telepathically. And it wasn't like words I was hearing, it was like telepathically he's making me feel okay and saying and removing doubt. And then I'm asking a question, and before I can even ask it, he's like answering my question. And so I was like, oh, like, I don't want to part with you, but I feel I'm okay now to be on my own, and you must go, must go to take care of him. And so he's like, I'm already like on it. And so I felt like once he parted, I was like looking to my high self then, and I was like, okay, high self, like, it's you and I, we got this, like, take care of me, like, show me the way. And now that I'm no contact, like, I'm trying to separate because I felt this is the right thing to do, because my 3D self is like someone who doesn't want to talk to me, somebody who is not doing all these things again that I felt seemed normal, like people who want to be together talk on the phone. And he would express if I hurt myself to say, hey, are you okay? And let me know, and all the things I would do with him. And he does not do this, and all those things were really, really triggering to me. And I was like, okay, so that means I'm triggered, time to call it quits. And I felt very empowered to just say, hey, like, what's wrong with you? And so I left it open this last time that we parted or were no contact. And he got triggered and he's just like, good night. And that was it. And I was like, okay, well, and then I said, like, you don't have to be so mean, I think is what I said to him. And he didn't respond. And I was like, okay, I guess this is no contact. I'm not going to reach out and whatever happens. And I felt like for, at least a week and a bit, I was like, okay, especially the 2 days that his high self was with me, I was like, I can get past this. And then it dawned on me. I was like, I'm back to the checklist. I'm back to expecting these things from him. And we can say, well, of course you're going to need to, like, you can say this, okay? You can say, well, of course you're going to need to talk to someone that you're going to be with. They need to take care. And it was like, in the 3D world, yes. I totally get it. I'm not saying, oh, I can be like treated like crap and put up with it. No. Trust me, like me, no. He ain't treating me like crap and I'm staying there. And he doesn't treat me like crap. That's the thing. It's like, I feel his love. He loves me, and I feel it and I feel him. And it's like, I need to be there with him energetically to help him through his suffering. And I feel like I want to be there because I want it, and it was like, I get in that mode where it's like I give and I give to him, and my ego self slips in there where it's like, you've been giving, what have you been getting? And I'm like, shut up. Like, I don't want that, right? And so I'll get to that point, and that's what I mean by the list. It's like I start to say, well, he doesn't talk to me on the phone and all these things. Like, what the fuck does it really matter? Like, this is all 3D ego shit, like it really, really, really is. And once we say, I can love this person how they are, and at that point, and not be disappointed, because the disappointment comes from a feeling of lack within us, that we are whole and complete, that we have everything that we need. And any lack, any negative emotion comes from a fueled emotion, from a thought. And that thought is all egoic. Our thoughts are just our mind. It's stories that come up that get triggered. Our pure consciousness does not know suffering and lack, because that comes from God. God is whole. God doesn't know lack. God doesn't know suffering. Okay, so I realized that, and I'm like, shit, like, I was expecting something from him, and that's why he went triggered, right? And it's like, anytime I'm in ego, he's triggered. And so that's why I was like, man, is he so ascended that like I get triggered, and then he like automatically like fucks off? And I don't know that he's so ascended, like I feel like the divine feminine definitely leads in the spiritual sort of energetic realm, although I do feel he is highly spiritual as well. I mean, we both must be, in order for us to reflect each other. And as you can see, I'm highly spiritual with my reading, which I didn't get into, your ability. I'll get back to that, because that's kind of the conclusion. But your ability to tap into your intuition and your psychic abilities get like overdrive, and your inspiration. Okay, now these could be two different things, or they could be intertwined. So when I first met him, I was hella inspired. I felt I could write books. I felt I could draw pictures. I felt I could paint. I felt I could skydive. And as an expert, okay, I mean, anyone can skydive, but I mean, I felt I could do all these things, fly a plane. I felt like I could just rule the world, and it wasn't like, oh, I'm so on top of the world that I feel so good, although some days I did feel this way. But I mean, I felt that way even before I met him. Some days I'm just like, yeah, I'm powerful and I'm empowered and I'm beautiful and I'm confident. So I'd feel these ways, and when I met him, I felt those days about the old me less, because it's like, ooh, someone that I want doesn't think I'm all these things, right? And it made me really question. And then it made me realize that all those things didn't matter anyway, like, and that was just an ego that's like, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. It's just a story I tell myself. What does empowerment really look like anyway? What is success anyway? What does it mean? All those things went away, okay? All of that, Linda, went away. So, but then I got so inspired, okay? And I was like, I could like work like on creating, okay? But I couldn't work. Like I couldn't do like logical, like, I don't know, like logical things at work, or things that to me seemed mundane. Like, honestly, I couldn't keep up with my bills. Like, I just left everything to like my husband to deal with. I was like, I couldn't, even though him and I were separated at the time, I was like, I can't stay on top of the bills. I can't make appointments anymore. And up until there, I was like running the household like militant. Like, I was like, hey, this is how it goes. Like, you don't want part of this, then time to mosey on along. That was just my thing. I was like, this is how I am, and this is the way it goes, and this is how I keep structure, And so all of it went out the window. So of course you can imagine, like, my husband at the time was just like, this is not even like you. It was like, oh, the bill's late, I don't know, then you stay on it, like, you do all that, like, I'm not doing any of that no more. I was like, which was unfair to him, but I couldn't focus on anything except for, I told him, like, I need to get help for myself because mentally I'm going through this fucking crisis, right? And so he was very supportive of me going through this, although he had to, obviously, my husband, go through his own triggering at that time, which I'll do a whole other video for that sort of thing. So anyway, inspired, okay, like, inspired. And so I was so inspired and just felt like this passion, to do this. And it was just fired up. And the more I got to know him, the more passionate I became about, like, all of this stuff that was creative and beauty. And I just felt like this knowledge was coming in from another place within me that was just coming to me, like, I could think quicker about, like, creative things. But yet when it came to, like, putting things together, like at work and numbers and that, like, that to me became tedious and I was so exhausted. So it was really weird. But the intuition, when it comes to twin flame, I've heard gets cut off, and mine did. Okay. I couldn't put the story together, although I was intuitive and I know energy. So for people would come to me and I'd read their stories and I could tell their energy. And when it came to me, I was like, I couldn't tell he's coming or going. I couldn't tell why he was pulled away. I couldn't tell all of these things. Although, like I said, energetically, I could feel him there. So it was like really questioning my own intuition and, like, in the dark. And I've heard in this twin flame journey, it's like this on purpose, for us to find our way and trust ourselves in a way, and then eventually the intuition slowly starts to build, and the more you listen to it. So now I feel my intuition with him is there somewhat, for the most part, but it sometimes gets robbed from me, and I don't see it. But what started happening was I started reading more tarot. I've always read tarot, okay, but not anywhere near this. And I started reading on YouTube specifically because previous to him I wasn't reading any tarot on YouTube, and just getting downloads from the divine, like reading cards, getting downloads from the divine, like I said, dreams, seeing all these things and being able to tap into frequencies and energy. And previous to him also, I would read palms. And so I was like, getting back into, like, palmistry and all of the things that I kind of dropped along the way, because it was just like, it was a thing that I'd like or know, but it didn't click until I met him. And I was like, okay, like, I can actually tap into this, And so for me, all of my clairaudience, clairvoyance, all the clairs kicked in over time. So you'll get your clairs, okay? Eventually they'll kick in. And so there's that. And now let me go back to what had happened when I got our last separation, and I realized I was doing the checklist, and I realized that I parted with him, or I was really upset because my intention was I wanted him to talk to me more, and I wanted all these things. And I was like, that is ego, that I'm needing something from him that I don't already have. And this was a month ago, okay? So still triggered, but it's far and few between. We don't part as much. And a month ago, it was, it was me getting triggered because I was looking at it from, again, the 3D binoculars, the ego, where I was like, when's the last time we talked on the phone? Like, I don't remember. And if you don't want that, clearly you don't want me, right? Like, that sounds so logical, and that's the part that people don't understand. And so you can't have this conversation with normal people, because then they'll be like, that is normal. Like, a guy who doesn't want to talk to you on the phone means he doesn't like you, right? But I know, because I've read for so many twins, and it's like, you don't get it. We can't, like, this isn't a normal connection. We have to overcome these obstacles and parts within ourselves that we don't even know why we're doing what we're doing. So it's like, he's not talking to me. I don't think he knows why he's not even talking to me. Of course he talks over the phone. I'm not stupid to people, but for whatever reason, it doesn't work with him and I because of our energy. Either it's too intense, it's not the right time. There's just things going on right now that needs to iron itself out, right? So I was like, shit, like, I went back into my expecting something from him, and I didn't for a long time. And I promised him I will stop calling it quits, because the last, I don't know, like, how many times it was me saying, you know what, I've had enough. Like, I isn't not going nowhere, and I'm just triggered. And then I pull away, and then either he'll come back to me, or mostly I come back to him, and we do this dance, right? But this last time I was like, I have to message him and just be, I feel horrible, but what happened? So I reached out and I was just like, can I sit here with you? Like, I feel bad. Like, I don't want this to be how it ends, and he's like, of course, like we're always together and you can sit here and we can, you know, make peace and find peace. And of course, we just instantly connected again into this soul oneness of passion and connectedness and understanding and I love yous and we're one and we'll always be together forever, happily ever after, you know. And that's the feeling that I have with him. And there is no expectation there, although it slips in there where I'm like, you know, sometimes I'm thinking like, where's this going? Like I want a physical presence to be here, like at some point that comes in. And then at other times I'm like, is that the ego that needing something physical? Like this is all completely a spiritual journey, you know, like it's so spiritual. It's all energetic. Like it's all about how to transcend any of those triggers and those egos and get to the place where you're unconditionally loving to all, not just your twin, and you're not trying to attain a something, because then that is egoic and that is not spiritual at all. You know, if it's not godlike, you know, if it stirs a feeling of lack, if it's greed, if it's trying to attain, all of that stuff is ego, then you're still needing work, you know, to get on this journey. And those things are normal and human, you know, but that's why this journey is in front of us. It's saying, don't just be like every other human. We have to now evolve from the beings that are very much in ego and lower three chakras and elevate to heart consciousness, you know. And this is the elevation that new earth needs, like the love and why twin flames are put together. It's like to raise the vibration of earth, and that energy that I radiate from my heart that I can feel when I'm meditating, it's going far and wide, it's going everywhere. You know, I used to send it to my twin, I used to send it to my family, I used to send it to my friends, and now I'm like, I'm sending it everywhere, you know. And I sit there and I'm just like, oh, I'm radiating this love, and you know, and tears are flowing. And that's another thing that I forgot, like you're in the dark night of the soul, which fuck, it's the biggest part that I totally forgot. It is, and you can go see my other reading, it is, you're on your knees, you're crying to God, and you're falling apart. And I mean, it's not like your husband left you and you're crying, okay? That hurts. Like, I'm not taking nothing away from that. That hurts. Twin flame pain is like you're losing a child, you've lost like your whole family burning in a building, and you're like, I don't know, like the feeling you have inside of you is so fucking intense. It is so intense, and you're crying, you know. And then you feel bliss and you feel joy and you feel like so much gratitude where you're crying as intently, and it's just as intently, you know. And so my sorrow, I realize this video is really long and I'm sorry, my sorrow, my suffering, my wrenching on my knees, like that happened for, I don't know, it's like been 2 years, you know, just crying and just be anywhere. And it's like all of a sudden I'm like, oh, like it hurts me, like I've lost everything, you know. And I'm not even thinking of the things I lost, it's the feeling within me. It is feeling like, I don't know if it's a loss so much as a sorrow and a death. And it's like this deepest pain I've never carried, and feel like I've lost a child is the only thing I can compare to. And then feeling so grateful for, like, the love is so much that it, like, I can't hear anything, and all I am like, oh my God, like I'm so blessed, like I'm so grateful. And I start thinking of all the people in my life. I'm like, oh my God, like so much love, so much, like I'm so loved by God, you know. I'm so grateful, and I feel the gratitude, and I'm at the foot of God, like kissing God, feeling like so almost insignificant, but so like blessed to be a part of this process. And so these extreme feelings were so much like this, and it was so exhausting, you know. And it was like so many times in the week that was like up and down, and I thought like I'm bipolar, like this is craziness, you know. But it was the ego death. And so yes, for 1.5 years of ego death, you know. And I don't know, like it's just it's really insane. And now I have that feeling come, not as intensely, but it blended together, where it's like I don't know if I'm feeling gratitude or like suffering the death of something, because it's that intense feeling now that comes, only one. Like I don't feel the highs, it's like that one intense feeling, and I don't know which it is, if it's bliss beyond measure or sorrow beyond capacity. Okay, and those bouts would last, I don't know, maybe like 4 minutes, sometimes a little longer, but it could be days where I would have it like constantly, and then there would be times where I'd have it like spread out, but it was constantly happening, and I was like, holy, like just drain, man, like stop crying, stop fucking feeling this, right? But it's like shedding the ego. And so it balanced out to now feeling that, and it could be one and the same, like the gratitude is the sorrow, and I was like, fuck yeah, the gratitude is the sorrow, you know, the pain is the this. And then it petered out to now, like for the last month, it's been quite peaceful. I haven't had anything, and it's the longest I've gone without feeling those feelings. But it's like I'm not peaceful, or I'm not blissful to the point of like overwhelming gratitude and feeling insignificant. That's like so overwhelming, like seeing the birth of a miracle. And I'm not also like on my knees crying that it's everything's like burnt up to a crisp and that my soul is like in this crazy state, right? So it's so peaceful. It is so like it's peaceful. There is a little bit of a sense of it almost feels, because you could think it feels a little bit like a lonely place, because it's like I'd rather be there than anywhere else. So then it becomes lonely, because it's like any people kind of ruin that, you know, like, and I know that sounds mean, but it's like all I see is ego in some cases. And it's like I can't go into the world so much without seeing that and it ruining my like peace. And that doesn't sound right either, but I'm still in this process, right? So it's like I could sit in peace and be totally fine and be totally at peace and not be triggered and find this like state, you know. And so now I'm like integrating back into society, you know, after like being pulled away for over 2 years. And it's like these triggers will happen, and I'm very aware. It's like, what am I thinking, you know? Like it's now directed at the people I'm engaged with. Like, how am I responding? Like, why am I thinking these things, you know? And that was the biggest lesson, I think, for me with my twin flame, was because he was opposite from me. Like, you know, he wasn't like a 9 to 5er, and he was a free spirit, and he was just, you know, just absolutely natural and beautiful and all those things. And for me, it was like, you know, I was like a businesswoman, and I was like, that was my world that I understood. And so seeing how he lived his life so free was like giving me the sense I can have freedom, you know. But then also seeing people that are living life differently than me does not mean that they're not successful, or it does not mean that they're better or worse off than me, you know. Like it's the mind state that causes our suffering. So I can have all the things like I had, you know, the beautiful home and the cars and the this and that and the jewelry and the all of that stuff, and be completely in my egoic darkness, you know. But I mean, ignorance is bliss. And was I happy? I think I was at that point, but I didn't know what I didn't know, you know. And now knowing what I know, I was like, man, was I in a state of frozen matrix, you know? Like I wasn't seeing life and I wasn't seeing beauty. And so my twin, totally made me see life and beauty and what matters, you know. And all of that stuff does not matter at all. Like that, not even close, doesn't even make me feel anything, you know. Like the feeling I get now with love and beauty, that's the feeling that touches me. And so I always felt that from him, you know. And so I think he's carried this, whether he knows it or not, or intentionally triggering me with this or not, but it was for me to see this, you know. So I don't know what I've made him see. And so this is another part that I put out there as a question. It's like, if you are the runner or the divine masculine, you know, like what are you feeling on that flip side? And I do talk to my twin a little bit about this, so I know that he senses things. It's not that he's oblivious. We do talk a little bit about twin flames. I think I've told him that I think he's my twin, and he hasn't really, like I said, he doesn't really feed into it, so I don't go off on it. So I don't know whether he believes it or not. I was questioning whether to ask him and just be like, hey, do you think we're twins? Like, to see what he'd say, just to be curious, right? Like, again, like, I don't know, is this egoic to need to know this? Probably, but it's like, I'm just curious, like, what is he going through? You know, is he suffering? I don't want him to, you know. Like, I know in the 3D he suffers, like I said, from addictions and things that are difficult in his life, but he always says he's happy doing himself, you know, and being himself. And it's like, okay, so I'm like, are we done then? You know, like I've reached a state where it's like I'm ready to integrate into the world and raise the vibration of the world. And you know, and love everything unconditionally, including him. And if he's coming or going, just like allowing myself to be open. And yes, obviously, I mean, I don't want to be treated poorly, but I know to keep my heart open without allowing myself to be taken advantage in a way that's going to cause me suffering, you know. But what then happens with him? Like, has he ascended in any way or spiritually changed in any way that's completely profound or significant or different? I don't know. And for Christmas, I sent him a letter talking about I said, you've caused a spiritual awakening within me, you know, and I was sharing this with him. But for the longest time, like, yeah, that was like already over 2.5 years that I'd known him, that I never told him this, you know, because I was like, what am I going to tell this guy? He's awakened me into some sort of crazy land, right? But I was like, no, like, you triggered a spiritual awakening within me, you know, like, and I owe you for just opening my eyes to this, you know. But I've realized I don't owe him anything. It was me within me waking myself up, you know, and that's why I felt like I owed him something, or like he had something above me in some way, because he was the one who woke me up, you know. And he still triggered me in that way, but it's like, with if it wasn't for whatever was within me, I wouldn't have woken up. And he definitely did not help in any regard. You know, he was just there as an energy, but there was no help. There was no being beside me when I needed him, you know. I mean, physically, obviously, like I said, energetically, he was already there. I just needed to see it, you know. Energetically, he's always been there, you know, and he says it to me, and now I see what he's saying, and it's like, yes. But at the time I was fighting it, I'm like, I don't care, like, energetically, like, I need you here, you know. Like, I'm crying, I'm going through selling my house, I have no job, I'm in the middle of my separation, my kids hate me now, I'm like not successful, and all these things. Is like, now I need you, now I need you, now I need you, where are you, you know, like, fuck you. Yeah, my life's upside down here. And it wasn't that I was turning it upside down to be with him by any means. It was like, I couldn't no more live that life, you know, whether he was there or not there. I was like, all those things were already underway. But I was like, if he loved me as I feel and as he's saying, why then am I going through this on my own? You know, like, why is he not here? You know, and so I hung on to that, and it was like, but that's not, one, that's not even me to hang on to anger, because even previous to this spiritual awakening, I was never angry or bitter. And so it's like, why am I mad? Like, he owes me shit, you know, doesn't owe me anything, zilch, diddly squat. And no one owes anything, anyone anything. So I was like, what is it, and I was like, I'm suffering here because I have to get through this on my own, you know. And even if he wanted to be there, this journey, he couldn't, because that was part of the journey. So I instantly just had this love opening, and I was going to say forgiveness, but it's not even forgiveness. There's nothing to forgive. He didn't do anything to me that I need to forgive, you know. But when we go through the journey, you might have to go through those stages. Is like, accept the fact they don't, your twin owes you shit. Okay, they don't owe you nothing. And you could say, well, okay, then I got to work on the forgiveness part, and that's fine if you start there. But really, if you look at it, you don't forgive them from anything, because they didn't do anything bad to you. Okay, they're just doing what's best for them, and they have every right to do this. And if it doesn't coincide with your ego's desires or wishes or wants, or how it lines up, that's your ego. Okay, and that ego needs to go away. So when you love your twin open, and you say, my twin is living his best life, okay, whether he's suffering or not, which I feel sometimes he's most likely suffering, but that's his own decision to make. If I say, I'm here for you and I love you and you are doing you and you're happy, I'm happy, you know. And that's where we're at. It's like, I'll hear from him every morning. It makes me happy. It makes me happy to hear that he's, you know, well on his way to doing his thing, and, you know, breaking from his addiction slowly, one day at a time. And I cheerlead him. And sometimes it's exhausting, you know, sometimes, because it's like, I want a cheerleader too, you know. But I get it. Like, I don't need a cheerleader. I am everything. Everything within me is already there. There's nothing to cheer on, you know? And so that's how I know he's sorting through things, because I feel like maybe he does have a little bit of an attachment to me, you know, and maybe he likes my energy, and that's okay. And I am in control of who I give my energy to, and, you know, and would I pass the person suffering? You know, would I pass the person suffering? No, I wouldn't. And so if it's him suffering, would I pass him up and be like, well, if I'm not, you know, getting what I need, then you suffer in silence? No. And so I don't see that's tit for tat, or you must remove yourself from your twin. so that they can have some sort of epiphany or a realization or awakening. It's like, no, because God wouldn't do that. You know, God extends love and grace. And so here I am, like giving him love and grace. And sometimes I do question, it's like, will that push him to do the best thing for him? You know, like, I don't know. Like sometimes tough love is a thing, right? Like, is that coming from egoic, or is that like an actual thing? And I'm like, but that doesn't feel right. Like it feels right for me to love him and just always unconditionally just cheer him on, you know? So that's where I'm at. That's the twin flame thingy. I hope this answered some of your questions. Sorry, it was more of a ramble. I don't know how to do really pointed, you know, here's point one, here's point two. So it's all intermeshed, you know, and like I said, your journey is going to be your journey. So things I said here might not resonate completely to your story, but I think the intensity and the obsession and the bizarre, unexplainable spiritual experience is unlike anything that anyone can ever understand. And so that's why anyone who has not been on this journey doesn't get it. You know, they don't get it. And even things online, it's like very pointed and like, oh, you're twin. Like they make it sound like it's a soulmate connection. And you know, like none of that resonates at all. Like, no, it's like painful, and you don't want this happily ever after hopping down the street energy, you know, like, do you want your twin? Yes, but it's like you'd rather them go away and this thing never happened because you're suffering, you're suffering, you're suffering, you're suffering. And until you hit the point where you can't stand yourself no more and the suffering, you make that change, you know, you make that change every day. So stay on it. I am here for you. I hope I help you energetically. If you're giving energy to your twin, I do recommend you pour it back to yourself. Although that whole thing of completely cutting off your twin to focus on self, yeah, I get it. And that is very good advice, but I think it's a dance, you know, a dance of recognizing, where am I in ego? Where am I acting out of love? Where am I acting out of, where are my intentions at? You know, like you don't have to be completely removed from your twin. Like, I mean, of course, if they're removed from you, you have no choice, but don't go like consistently chasing them. But look at where your intentions are, you know, because once your intentions are good and you're like, I want to just send them love just because, you won't be hurt if they don't respond. And you're just sending them love. And so for those who say, well, energetically they run more. No, I don't think my twin never runs. When I say I love you and it's coming from, I'm just telling him I love him. If I say you're beautiful, let me sit with you, let me hold you, all those things I feel from my heart. He doesn't trigger. When I start to push and have an agenda, I want to see you, I need you to call me, all of these things egoically, then he runs. Okay, so of course they're going to run when you push in that way. But if you're just being authentically what you feel around your twin and say, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling hurt, but then question that within yourself. Is this an ego? You know, because pain, suffering, lack, contracting, feeling down, that is not a place of unconditional love. That's not God. That is all ego, 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 based on conditioning and programming. That we need to see that filter and see it as a story, as an illusion that we're hanging on to. And that's where the suffering happens, okay? Because below that, you're already with your twin, you're whole and complete. You don't need anybody physically in the 3D. All of those things, when you realize that, you are empowered to just be, you know, and that's when your twin aligns with you and you guys are just being in the moment, you know, and it's beautiful. And you don't need promises and engagements and all of those things that your mind was saying that's logically in the world makes sense. You know, it doesn't make sense spiritually. Spirituality doesn't know of any of this stuff. You know, it does know of union, does know of souls merging, you know, and when I'm authentically sharing with him my feelings, non-egoically, him and I are one. You know, he tells me and I tell him, like, one, like we are just one, you know. So that's my story. I hope this helped you guys. I'm saying goodbye now. I will be doing an eclipse, solar eclipse reading because this energy coming in with the solar eclipse is supercharged. So I hope this helps you guys. I love you so, so much. Hang in there and I will see you soon. Bye-bye.